I don't think we should put our life in silos, right? That we have an appreciation of music, an appreciation of art, of learning and literature and Torah, and it's all separate. For me, it all overlaps with each other. So when in my earlier days, I was listening to pop songs and they talk about the flood, I was kind of intrigued. And it turned out, and other subjects as well. And so many times in my shurim, I've brought in different songs that relate to what I'm teaching. So I thought I'd do it backwards this time, which is based on the songs. So we're going to do 4 different classes. This one will be about the flood and 4 different songs. There were pop songs written, which are ultimately interpretations of the flood. Next time, we're going to look at Stevie Wonder and Madonna and their appreciation of life in quite unusual ways. The third week is 2 great writers, Peter Gabriel, who you'll see is obviously my favorite, Peter Gabriel and George Michael, who both wrote a song called Praying for Time, which is such a great title, and they're really thoughtful songs. So we're going to analyze those in the third week. And the last week, Bob Dylan, Randy Newman, Springsteen, they all talk about God ultimately. So we'll build up to God in the last week. But tonight we're going to do the flood. We're going to pop goes the flood and analyze the why is it that these are 4 different singers looked at the flood and what they meant by it. So I'll show you the handout. I'll share the screen. Actually, maybe I'll put it in there and you can look at it as well. Hang on a second. Let me just copy that and I'll put it in. I'll put it in the chat first of all, just in case you want to look at it. Oh, that's to everybody. To everyone in meeting. It's just in case you want to open it separately from my screen or print it out, whatever, you can do that. But I'm going to share it now. Here we go. There we go. Pop goes the flood. And I'm going to look at actually 4 different songs. One by Sting after he left the band The Police. One by Neil Hannon. You might not have heard of him. It was an English band called the Divine Comedy. And I'm sure you've heard of some songs by them. Really a brilliant Irish singer, writer, quite ironic, brilliant. And then we'll look at Bruce Springsteen, the boss as well, and his approach to the flood. And finally, Peter Gabriel. But just to warm you up with the key issues, what makes the flood so special? Well, you think it's a lot of rain. But the thing about rain is that Geshem, that word is used all over Tanakh. But the word for flood, mabul, can you see? This is chapter 6 of Bereshit. God says to Noach, I'm going to bring a flood, mayim al haaretz, right? It says the flood, water on the earth. Now, if the word mabul means flood, then the definition of flood is water on the earth. So why do you need to say both? And it turns out that the word mabul is only ever used for this story. Listed underneath, you see in Bereshit, and then once in Tehillim, are all the mentions of the word mabul in Tanakh, and it's only ever used when referring to this event, which implies to me that it's not just about rain, it's about something else. It's a mabul, a kind of flooding, and it could be a conceptual flooding, which is expressed in terms of ma'im ala, it's water on the earth, l'shachet kol basar, to destroy all flesh, that anything that has life from under the heavens, God's going to destroy. So you're noticing already this story has a kind of, well, I won't use the word magical, but unique feeling to it. It's not about a historical event. It's not trying to describe ancient earthquakes or meteorological phenomena. It's trying to explain some other more conceptual idea. And the same was also reflected in source 2. At the beginning of the flood, what happened did it say? In the 600 years of Noah's life, what happened? Nikvu kol mayanot tahon rabah va'obot shamayim. Right? Burst all the well springs of the deep and the casements of the heavens. That's Robert Alter's translation. And then at the end of the flood, same phrase again. Mayanot tahon va'obot shamayim. I've got it in blue here for water. Well springs of the deep and the casements of the heavens were stopped up. Now that language, again, that double phraseology is unique. Only occurs here, both those two together. The waters of the deep. So rain normally falls. But in this case, water comes up from the deep as well. And not just from sky, but from the casements of the heavens, arubot hashamayim, which implies, again, some kind of fundamental changing of nature, of physical reality. The spaces above and below us, which are normally separate, opened up and mixed up everything together. So my argument from that is that this is not a historical occurrence. It's a kind of much more fundamental idea that we're trying to understand here. Okay, I'm just looking at the chat to go. I might do hello from Toronto. We can talk after. All right. So let's focus. So that's it. So now, as I say, what we're going to do is I'm going to play each of the songs to you, and I've tried to find a video that has the words on it as well. So hopefully this will work, and if not, Ari will tell me very quickly. So you can listen to the song. If you don't want to look at the words, you can just listen to it and not look at the screen. But I've got the words there as well, and they've all got different feel to them. So the first song we're going to do is by Sting in the first album, no, the second album that he did after he left the Police. It's in 1987. The album Nothing Like the Sun, and this song is called Rock Steady. It's got a different kind of beat to it, and it's a kind of funny version, play on parts of the flood, but not the whole flood. So let's see if I can make that work. Go over to there, make sure the share sound is there, press share, and this one now. And if it doesn't work, Ari, tell me quickly. Here we go.
Something before it's too late and we're gone. I mean, just how safe is this boat moving on? Rock steady, 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 rock steady. Rain for 40 days and 40 long nights. I never seen rain like it. It looked like our old friend was being time to worry, though there was just too much to do between the signified monkey and the kangaroo. We had to wash all the animals, we had to feed them too. We were near human slaves in a big floating zoo. She said, hey baby, I don't mean to be flick, but it seems this old man is on some power trip. I said, no, sugar, you must be wrong. I mean, look at the size of this boat we're as safe as houses, as safe as mother's milk. He's as cool as November, smooth as China silk. He's God's best friend, he's got a seat on the board. And life may be tough, but we're sailing with the Lord. Rock steady, rock steady, rock steady, rock steady, rock steady, rock steady. Rock steady, rock steady. Woke up this morning and something had changed. Like a room in my house had just been rearranged. She said, it stopped raining and I know the guy's kind, but if we stay here much longer, I'm gonna lose my mind. So he said we had a mission for his favorite dove, to see if there was any mercy from this great God above. So to find dry land away the white bird flew, we didn't need no country, just a rock would do. When the dove came back to us, he threw down a twig. It was manna from heaven and meant we could blow this gig. But the rock's too small, he said, can't you see? I said, it's just perfect for her. It's perfect for me. Rock steady, rock steady. It's perfect for me. Rock steady, 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 rock steady. Got me know what I rock steady, rock steady, rock steady, rock steady.
There you go. So, kind of ends quite abruptly. It doesn't do the full story that you'd like. Quite unusual. Let me share with my handout again, and you'll see the key phrases that I want to look from that song. What he's doing and talking about here. There's a couple of themes. Now, obviously, analyzing or looking at words and music and style is not an exact science. It's more impressionistic what he's trying to do. And he's got that wonderful beat, the kind of feeling of the swaying of the boat and the kind of beat that he's playing with. And it's got a kind of religious feel to it as well. And there's definitely an issue where they get off the boat at the end. These two people don't want to be with Noah. They think he's on some kind of power trip. He's God's best friend. He's got a seat on the board. That's a kind of evangelist aspect. And Sting talked about it and said he was trying to bring out the fact of, who is going to follow a guy like Noah? And what does that mean? He was trying to compare it to the evangelists of today, who are on a kind of power trip with God and have these dramatic changes that destroy the world. And actually, it's pretty dangerous and best to leave them alone. So that's one aspect of the song. But the bit that I want to focus on is this the text I've got over here in italics. That's from the song. He said, they responded to an advert in the paper. Volunteers wanted for a very special trip to commune with Mother Nature on a big wooden ship. Now, commune with Mother Nature has that very much environmentalist feel to it. And in fact, Sting, as we know, is a sponsor of the Rainforest Foundation and cares very much about the environment. And there's an element to that song in this core verse that we can see over here. He said, "We had no time to worry, though. There was just too much to do between the signified monkey and the kangaroo. We had to wash all the animals. We had to feed them too. We were merely human slaves on a big floating zoo." Now, that is interesting. What he's saying here, it seems, is that the job of the humans were slaves supporting the zoo, supporting the animals. And one way of reading the flood is to think of the ark as life itself. And unlike what had been happening before when the earth was destroying itself, Noah's job, Noah and his wife and his 3 sons and their wives, was to protect and look after the animals. That was their job. And you see there's a midrash below, a very famous midrash, which I love to read, which is on this subject, which says the following. Amar Melchizedek. Abraham said to Melchizedek, this is referring to chapter 14 of Genesis, when Abraham meets Melchizedek after the battle of the 4 kings and the 5 kings. And according to the rabbis, Melchizedek was Noah's son Shem. He was a survivor of the ark. So basically, this is the one time where someone who survived the ark and Abraham talk to each other. And they have a conversation. You can imagine, what would you say to Noah? So here's what Abraham says. How did you merit to survive the ark? How come you came out? Amallah, he said to him, how do we survive? What gave us the justification? But staka shainosim. It was because we gave staka. We did righteous acts. Right? So Abraham goes, Amallah, v'chi mat staka haya lachem lasot. V'chi aniyim hayusham. Right? He goes, what do you mean you did charity? Well, were there poor people on the ark? It was just you, Noah, and the sons, right? How could you do staka at all? And so Shem goes, you don't get it. Amalai says, no. On the beasts and the animals and the birds. We didn't sleep all night long. If you weren't busy caring for one, we're looking after another. So wonderful midrash saying, and this is important, by the way, because Avraham becomes a man of staka mishpat, righteousness and justice. That's in chapter 18. That becomes the characteristic of Avraham, his kindness and care and righteousness. But where did that come from? If you're a believer in the great men theory, then, great men, and it's always men, historically, just come up with new ideas and change the world. But the truth is that it takes a village, it takes a culture and a context for it to happen. And Avraham built on Noach, and Noach built on previous. So Avraham learns from Noach, before you can care for other human beings and other human life, you have to care for life itself. And it says that was our job in the ark. We were doing staka the whole time. We looked after the animals. It was a big floating zoo, to quote Sting. And that was our job, to protect life. And if that's the case, and I write about this in my book, then the metaphor of the ark isn't about people dying. It's about protecting of life. And that the world today is like an ark. Now, extinction is the normal situation of evolution of society, of life on Earth. Most species that have ever existed have become extinct. Only very few survive. That's normal. But what's happened the last few hundred years is mass extinctions through human activity, through pollution of the seas and of the air and of the earth. And that means that we are killing animals from the arc of life. And that is much more problematic. They reckon by 2050, a quarter of species might have been destroyed because of what we're doing. And this is a major problem. And the story of the ark every year, right, is not, again, a not historical story. And using Sting here is an argument to teach us our responsibility to protect all life on Earth. That's our job, mere human slaves on a big floating zoo. And that lesson taught Avraham to care on top of that for human beings as well. And that becomes the beginning of chesed and the Jewish value of kindness, hospitality. But underneath that basic connection is that care for life itself. And that's what we learn here. So Sting's reading of the ark, definitely in this paragraph anyway, is about our responsibility to all life on Earth and to protect the animals and the rainforests and different areas of the environment. So that's one reading. Feel free, by the way, to make comments in the chat as you go. But that's our first reading. I want to bump through to get through all four. So we'll feel free to put things in the chat and I'll respond. But let's jump on to our second song. That's one reading. Our second song. Now, this is a completely crazy song. This is really mad. This is the Divine Comedy. The song is called Here Comes the Flood. It's about the worry that we're going to do. What's going to kill us, right? What's going to wipe off life on Earth? Now, I don't know if you know this, but every year there's actually an organization that works out the most dangerous, likely ways of the Earth being destroyed. What's it going to be? AI? Is it going to be a mass disease or alien invasion? What is it? But this song, kind of very playfully, because he's always very playful, discusses the different possibilities. Have I done this right? Because I've got, that's the previous one, but how do I go back to that? Yes. Hope you can see that. Yeah. And let me get the right song. It's over here, the Divine Comedy. So tell me if this doesn't work, but it should play now. Now, this one doesn't have the words. Good point. Right. This one doesn't have the words. So I'm going to do is I'm going to put the words in the chat for this one, just in case you do want to listen to them. You should be able to hear a lot of it, and I'm going to refer to it. But if you really are a stickler and you like to hear the words, then I'll put them in the chat now. Here we go to everyone. Pressing lots of buttons here, paste. Yeah, that worked. Okay, that's good. Okay, so now that's in the chat. If you want to listen, have it, or you can watch this video of showing mass destruction and danger as you play. Now, is that right? No, that's not the right one now. Stop share. Let's try this again. Share, and the one with the songs. That's it. Make sure the sound is on. Good. And here we go. The Divine Comedy. Here Comes the Flood. And there's a wonderful little rap in the middle about the race to destroy all life.
Just another worried little citizen of this modern-day Pompeii, waiting for the meltdown. The showdown, the great American close down. When that fault line that runs right through society's fabric finally snaps, and the whole damn thing starts unraveling. Why watch the sports channel when you can watch CNN? Ladies and gentlemen, the greatest race in history. The race to end all races. In fact, the race to end history. In lane 1, the San Andreas Fault. In lane 2, global recession. In 3, El Nino. In 4, chemical war. Lane 5, interracial conflict. Lane 6, autoimmune deficiency syndrome. On your marks, get set, wait for it, go!
So honestly, actually, I forgot. I don't mean to upset people by showing that video of the song, but Hannon is a brilliant writer, and he's trying to stoke up or discuss the fears that we have, the fear of mass destruction. So if you couldn't hear some of the words, here they are. Here comes the flood, rivers of blood, baby. Here comes the quake, evacuate while you still can. Here comes the fire, a funeral pyre, baby. Here comes the flood. Here comes the bloodbath. It's like, what is it that's going to destroy us? Is it the San Andreas fault or global recession? El Nino is the kind of climate changes that happen on a massive level, chemical war, interracial conflict, right? What are the different issues that are going to destroy us and make us afraid? And the music builds in this kind of very dramatic, cinematic way. And by the end, you've got laser beams and aliens fighting and landing. And some people don't worry about these kind of things, but at different times when people get a kind of a worry of existence and life and how things will continue. And that's in fact one way of reading the flood, right? The worry of mass destruction. What will happen to us? And some people build shelters to survive these kind of things, to believe it'll be okay, or how can we do it, or the kind of foolish attempt to kind of build spaceships to go live on another planet because this one's not good enough. So instead of trying to look after this planet, they kind of go, well, we'll solve it with science and go to somewhere else, which is just running away literally from the problem, which is we have to learn to live on this earth together. And the last line is, if you believe all that you read, you know the end is nigh. We're all going to die. There's no hope, and something's going to destroy us. If one thing doesn't get us, something else will get us. Now, how does the flood respond to that? Well, as I turn over to the second page of the handout, after the end of the flood, right, God speaks to Noah and says, well, God speaks to himself and says, V'omer Hashem el libo. God says in his own heart to himself, and it's amazing that in the Torah we're kind of eavesdropping in God's own heart. Obviously, God doesn't really speak in his heart, right? Doesn't speak because God doesn't have a heart. God doesn't speak. It's all metaphorical, but the message is clear. So God's internally decided, Lo osif lekalel od et hadama ba'avor hadam. I will never again, Lo osif, I will never again will I damn the soil because of humankind. Ki yetze lev adam hadam ra min orav. For the devising of the human heart are evil from their youth. Right? People from the very beginning will do evil and horrible things. It's not worth destroying the earth for it. Velosif od lahakotet kol chai kasher asiti. And never again will I strike down all the living things as I did. It's not going to happen again. You don't need to worry about this idea of mass destruction, right? Od kol yomei haaretz Zera v'katzir v'kor v'chol. For what will happen is all the earth days, the seed time will happen, and the harvest, and the cold, and the heat, the kite, the chorif, and summer, and winter, the yom v'layl, and day and night, lo yishbotu will not cease. It's a promise from God never to disrupt nature, or positive way of looking at it, to guarantee the structure of nature. God will never destroy the earth again with a flood and make time go upside down, which is what happened, and the flood to happen. Now, humans might destroy it in different kind of ways, but God's not going to do that. So that's a kind of reassurance of life continuing, which is a response to that fear of mass destruction. That's another way of reading what the flood's really about. It's about how do we deal with the fears that we have about annihilation, of death, not just of ourselves or of our people, God forbid, but of the whole world. And so the flood is a reassurance at the end. Never again will I do this kind of thing. It was a one-off. And again, even could be taken metaphorically, and not as a historical event, but as a conceptual event. But that's never going to happen again. Margot, I'm glad you like the Divine Comedy. Listen on Spotify to their greatest hits. They're brilliant. They really are. Brilliant writer, Neil Hannon. But anyway, that's just one example. So that's the second approach, right? Where the flood is about primal destructiveness, right? And what we do, which is, here's a great word you might know from therapy, catastrophize. You know, catastrophizing is when you kind of think, oh, it's all going to be terrible, it's all going to fall apart. That's what the flood comes to respond to. You can catastrophize, the world will end, but God says, never again. It's not going to happen like that. You can guarantee, and Maimonides is very strict about this, that nature will run its course. That nature can be relied upon, and the earth is here. You know, when people talk about nuclear destruction, the earth will be destroyed, as was pointed out to me by Lord Winston, is that the earth will be destroyed, will be destroyed. Humans might disappear off the planet, but the earth will survive. It might take a few thousand years to get rid of the fallout, but we'll survive. So the Ark story is about, again, responsibility. That's more the Sting point of view. But also about our worries about global annihilation and destruction. So you've got lots of interesting comments coming in the chat here about how you think about these things. That's great. Keep them coming. Okay. Yes. Yeah, interesting points about veganism. We could talk about that another time, although you got allowed afterwards to eat animals, but that might not be the ideal. And again, it's another chapter in my book. Why does God allow us to eat meat and to sacrifice animals? And you've always thought about them as separate issues, but if you read the Torah, the word ochel, eating, is used more for sacrifices than it is for eating animals. And the point, therefore, in the Torah, conceptually, they're related. Eating animals and sacrificing are fundamentally linked. And if you want to understand the Torah's view to eating animals, you need to understand the notion of sacrifice. But that's another topic for another day. We've done two. We've done Sting's Evangelist and Protection Ark of Earth flood. And we've had Neil Hannon, the Divine Comedy's Fear of Mass Destruction flood. Now we take a very different track as we go over to America, you guys. We hear Bruce Springsteen's amazing night from his first major album, Asbury Park, Greeting from Asbury Park, 1973, Lost in the Flood. A very different kind of song, very difficult to understand, brilliant writer. I'm going to play you a version of it where you can see the words, so it will help you. And I challenge you to work out what he's talking about. So there we go. This is called Here Comes the Flood. Here Comes the Flood. And this one, this one is called Lost in the Flood. Lost in the Flood by Bruce Springsteen. And that is over here. Yeah, here we go. Enjoy.
town all alone. He must be from the fort. He hears a high school girl sing. His countryside's burning with wolfmen fairies, dressed in drag for homicide. They hit and run, bleed sanctuary, be the holy stone we have. Breaking beams, breaking crosses, with spastics reading perfection. And sisters run bold through Vatican halls, pregnant, bleeding the Immaculate Conception. And everybody's wrecked on Main Street from drinking unholy blood. And stickers smile sweet and gonna breathe deep, his ankles caked in mud. What's a hey, gunner man? That's quicksand. That's quicksand. That ain't mud. Have you thrown your senses to the wars, or did you lose them in the flood? That pure American brother, dull-eyed and empty face. He races Sundays in Jersey, yet his Chevy's not so great. He rides her low on the hip on the side, he's got Bound for Glory and red, white, and blue flash paint. He leans on the hood, telling racing stories. The kids call him Jimmy the Saint. Well, that blazing North boy, he's gunning that bitch, loaded to blast a point. He rides head first into a hurricane and disappears into a bomb. Till there's nothing left but blood where the body fell. Nothing left that you could sell. Just junk all across the horizon. A real highwayman's farewell. Someone said, hey kid, you think that's oil? Man, that ain't oil, that's blood. Well, I wonder what he was thinking when he hit that store. Or was it just lost in the flood? Eighth Avenue sailors in satin shirts whisper in the air. Some store-bought incarnation of Maria, she's putting on me to stare. And Bronx's best apostle stands with his hand on his own hardware. Everything stops here, 5 quick shots, the cops come up for air. And now that whiz-bang gang from uptown, they're shooting up the street. That cat from the Bronx, he starts letting loose, but gets blown right off his feet. Some kid comes blasting around the corner, but a cop puts him right away. He lays on the street holding his legs, screaming something in Spanish, still breathing while I walk away. And someone said, hey man, did you see that? His body hit the street with such a beautiful thud. Wonder what that dude was saying. Or was he just lost in the flood? Hey man, did you see it? Your cats are sure messed up. I wonder what they were getting into. Were they all just lost in the
So that's it's a fascinating version of the song. It's live. You can see it on the internet if you want, if you go onto YouTube. But I found a version where you can see the words. That's why I want to show you that one. But it's worth looking to see how he performs it, because that intro, that piano intro in the end, isn't on the original album, which I listened to the album. I listened to for many years. Never understood what it was about. Just loved the sound of it. But when I really started looking at the words, it really fascinated me. He's doing amazing things. 3 different verses focusing on different parts of late 20th century American society and what he feels about it. And that kind of piano bit at the beginning and the end in the live version gives a kind of fairy tale feel to it. So he's kind of taking you into another world as he builds up in his drama. So who are the 3 characters? And let's unpack them and see what he's talking about. So in the first verse, it's of a soldier returning from a war as a changed man. And as you've mentioned in the chat, probably from Vietnam. Like a hungry runaway, he walks through the town all alone. He succumbs to the surrounding culture of drugs, violence, promiscuity, and faithlessness. Everybody's wrecked on Main Street from drinking unholy blood. So it's talking about soldiers coming back from war and the general, malaise of society of him growing up. And so he's talking there about war in that first and the results after the war, and also the war that goes on in society. In the second verse, he's now talking about a kind of sport. This is, a New Jersey boy races cars on Sundays, right? And what does he do? He shows off. This show-off is a speed junkie and ends up in a fatal head-on collision. And what's it for? Why does he do it? There's nothing left but some blood where the body fell, just junk all across the horizon. A real highwayman's farewell. Nothing you can sell. So this boy's doing it to get kicks, to find thrill in life, because life itself isn't thrilling. So he does this as another kind of escape. So that's in a way, maybe the kind of escape in sport. And the third verse, which is the one that really got me thinking at first, is about a gang, right? A puffed up street gang kid from the Bronx carries a gun, stands with his hand on his own hardware. During a shootout, he gets blown off his feet, and it's about gang warfare and cops and shooting and that kind of violence. And what's interesting is the repeat in each verse, because in each verse, he says, "Hey man, did you see that?" The first one, he's stuck in the mud, and then in the blood, and then in the third. But what does it mean, "Hey man, did you see that"? That means there's people watching. What's the word for that? Bystanders. We're watching as our society crumbles. We're not getting involved in trying to fix it. We're looking at it and looking at it in a kind of wistful, thoughtful way. Is that oil? Is that blood? Right? Is that quicksand? Is that mud? Look at that beautiful thud. We're kind of detached and looking at the bystanders instead of, being shocked about the social breakdown, the fabric of society. We're kind of standing outside and looking at it. And that's his flood. So for Bruce Springsteen, the flood is not about water. It's not about destruction of the earth from outside, from God. It's the human destruction, the flood of all our failures, spreading into all parts of our society. And we might escape through racing or the consequences of war or gangs. It's the social breakdown of society. And if you look at source 5, it relates to that as well, right? Because God says in chapter 6 at the beginning, why did he destroy the earth? The earth will become corrupt before God. And the earth was filled with lawlessness. Yes, the word Hamas, you probably know, but the word Hamas occurs in the Torah. Genesis chapter 6, verse 11. The earth was filled with Hamas, which means lawlessness. Terrible, terrible thing. And God sees and he sees that it's been corrupt. All flesh had corrupted its way on earth. It needed to be washed away. It was falling apart. And so Bruce Springsteen, again, is focusing on what humans had done to cause this. And that is the flood itself. The flood isn't God's response to the corruption. The flood is the corruption itself. And that's what's going on. All these people and so many more succumb to a miserable fate in the song. With the riding title hopeless, each gets lost in the flood. What does that say for today? What does that say for today? So that's our third reading of The Flood and Bruce Springsteen, Lost in the Flood from 73. Just looking at the chat here just to keep up. Yes, much machismo, Adria, absolutely. But the words, what he's saying is very sophisticated, even with that stuff at the same time. So the final one, as you will discover, one of my favorite singers is Peter Gabriel. Peter Gabriel was the lead singer of, I'm tired. What they called? Phil Collins took over afterwards. I'm tired. What's the remind me, Ami? He was the lead singer of, oh gosh. Can't believe it's gone. Can anybody help me here? What was Peter Gabriel? He went alone and separate from them, but before then he was the. You're putting it in the chat. Thank you very much. Genesis, of course. Yes, he was lead singer of Genesis, and then he went away, and then they got the drummer Phil Collins to do it because he sang along with the guys who were trying out for the band. Peter Gabriel this is like early 70s experimental music, but Gabriel is a brilliant songwriter. The music and the words meld brilliantly. A fascinating singer. He's got a kind of slow version of this he did with Kate Bush, but this original one from his first album, which doesn't have a name to it, his albums don't have names, they're just all Peter Gabriel, is called Here Comes the Flood. And this is the most sophisticated one that we're going to see, because this is a flood of consciousness taking over the earth based on a dream that he had. So let me play you. It's very beautiful. It's kind of weird, but after a couple of listens, you'll play it all the time. So here we go. This is Peter Gabriel's Here Comes the Flood. Very, very different to Hannon's one. Let me go back here if I can find it. Yeah, here we go. And it's got the words as well. Here we go. Enjoy.
When the night shows, the signals grow on radios. All the strange things, they come and go. There's early warnings, stranded starfish have no place to hide. Still waiting for the swollen Easter tide. There's no point in direction, we cannot even choose a side. I took the old track, the hollow shoulder, across the waters. On the tall cliffs, they were getting older. Sons and daughters, the jaded underworld was riding high. Waves of steel, of metal, at the sky. And as the nails sunk in the cloud, the rain was warm and soaked the crowd. Lord, here comes the flood. We'll say goodbye to flesh and blood. In the end, the seas are silent, and then he's still alive. You'll be those who gave the right to survive. Drink more, dreams you're running dry. When the flood comes, you have no home, you have no warmth. In the thunder crash, you're 1,000 minds within a flash. Don't be afraid to cry about your sea. The actor's gone, there's only you and me. And if we break before the dawn, they'll use up what we used to be. Lord, here comes the flood. We'll say goodbye to flesh and blood. In the
So I'll stop it there. Quite a shocking song as well, but even harder to understand, I think, in some ways than Springsteen, and quite dramatically done and builds up very well with lots of imagery. But let me just tell you straight away what Gabriel wrote about it, because it really did help. Said Gabriel in an interview, "When I wrote this song, I'd had an apocalyptic dream in which the psychic barriers which normally prevent us from seeing into each other's thoughts had been completely eroded, producing a mental flood. Those that had been used to having their innermost thoughts exposed, right, would handle the torrent, but those inclined to concealment would drown in it." Now think about that. What he's saying is we all have our private thoughts, our feelings, and if we're used to sharing them and being honest and open about who we are, then if those barriers between our consciousnesses were opened, that'd be fine. We'd connect, we'd be closer. But if what we're holding from the world is some kind of tainted, weird, destructive, self-hating, vile horribleness, then when that opens up, the flood barriers open up and that mental flood connects us all, we would drown. And that's what the song is about. Okay? So he talks about your 1,000 minds within a flash, all interconnected. So his version of the flood is the connection of all thought. Now, what's interesting is in terms of the way it's written in the Torah, is in the Torah because he talks about we'll say goodbye to flesh and blood, and the phrase "kol basar," all flesh being destroyed on the earth, is repeated over and over again in the story of the flood. It's really the flesh being gone, but more clearly is actually what God says before the flood, right? Where God says, this is at the end of actually the Seder Bereshit, where God is thinking about destroying the earth. God says, "Vayah Hashem ki rabba ra'at hadam." God saw that humanity's evil was great. V'chol yetze machshavot libo, and that every thought the heart devised was only evil all the time, and that's why God destroyed the earth. God looked into the hearts of humanity and saw that it was just vile. So in Gabriel's interpretation of the flood, you don't need to bring water. You don't need to bring rain. You don't need to bring Hanan's alien invasion or mass destruction. All you need to do is take down the barriers of people's consciousness, that we can see and be exposed to each other as we really are inside our own minds. And that would be enough to cause a mental flood that would destroy most people unless they had something pure in their consciousness. That's what he's talking about. It's a very interesting way of reading it. As I said, it's the last song on his first album, and it kind of builds and it's dramatic. And he says, look, and the quote, "Lord, here comes the flood. We say goodbye to flesh and blood. If again the seas are silent, any are still alive, it will be those who gave that island to survive." That's their consciousness. "Drink up, dreamers, you're running dry." Right? Drink up your chance, because you're going to run dry when this thing opens up. So it's a very impressionistic song in the different verses, but that's what he was trying to get at, the mental flood. So, because I'm conscious of the time, let's summarize, and I'll take comments and questions. So here's the summary. For Sting, this mabul, as I told you, this unique word the Torah uses for this event, reminds us of our environmental responsibilities as custodians of the earth. For the Divine Comedy, Neil Hannon, humanity's prime self-destructiveness is terrifying, what we do to ourselves, right? And as well as other ones, and leads us to catastrophize and be worried about our lives. And the story of the flood is to reassure us that God won't ever let this happen again. Springsteen describes late 20th century social drowning in a flood of moral failures of society. And Peter Gabriel realized that the mabul threatens the essence of our humanity, our brittle consciousness. What happened if God took our consciousness and let them flood into each other? What would open up to each other? What kind of flood would that cause? That'd be much worse than anything physical, right? A very different way of looking at it. So these readings really, and I listen to the songs and I go back to the text, and there's hints of, as I've shown you, in the Torah text of all four of them. And it really widens the way of reading this story. When you get poets and artists, they're not philosophers, but they feel a different way of looking at things. And just by listening to their words and playing it back into the Torah, you look at things in different kinds of ways. So that's what I wanted to share with you tonight, these four different approaches. Let's look at the chat and some of the comments.
So I've been following the chat, and I have some notes for you. So first of all, thank you for bumming us all out on the eve of our July 4th holiday. And now we know what you work out to in the gym. It's very depressing. We're going to send you some more happy songs. I'm wondering
Oh no,
actually.
next week's happy. Next week is
Okay.
super happy.
Well,
It's
well,
Stevie
we'll
Wonder
do
and
a
Madonna.
promo. I also, people thought it was very funny that the word you couldn't remember was Genesis for the name of the
Yes.
group. Of all the words, the rabbi
Yeah,
couldn't
good point.
remember
Good point. Good point.
Genesis. Um, I don't know how many people in this group actually have heard any of these songs. I don't know. Maybe Neil. I vote Neil Eisenberg. Maybe has heard one or two of them. But I did create, as you were talking, the Zarum Summer playlist on Spotify that I shared with people. And so as we go along in this series, we will add to it and people can listen at their leisure, although I would suggest not listening to the depressing songs tomorrow. Let's do some American songs. So the questions were, have you met any of these artists that you are sharing their songs? And if so, did you discuss any of this with them? Any of the stuff that you're going to teach us in this series?
No, I haven't. These ones I haven't met. I met Billy Bragg. These people I haven't met, but I've looked at interviews where they talk about their feelings and attitudes. So I tried to kind of check that that's what they're going for. So I'm pretty sure about all four of these ones what they're about. Next week will be harder. Stevie Wonder is very hard to understand, but they're fascinating. Thanks, Charlotte, for saying you like my book. I appreciate that. By the way, in terms of the veganism and the animals and the meat and the flood and getting rid of meat, that's a very good point. And I write about it in my book in terms of a desire, ta'eva, is very much about meat and so on. But are there other questions you wanted to highlight?
So
Yeah.
there was a question of these songs are dated to a certain generation. Have you taught this to younger people? And if so, how do they react to this material?
It's interesting. I mean, young people discover older music. So my teenage daughters are going through their Billy Joel and Beatles phase. So they don't mind listening songs from older people. But look, these are the songs that speak to me. In their time, they will have their ones. But as I said, I just started noticing all these songs that had floods in them. So if people send me more modern ones about a flood, then I'll do that as well. But I read everything to help me understand Torah better. What is a mabul? And I never would have thought the Gabriel thing or read that into Torah without him. And that's opened up a whole bunch of midrashim and other avenues of thought for me. So yeah, so that's I'm a child of my era, obviously. But if I hear new songs, I'll get excited by that. But I don't think Taylor Swift has done a flood song yet.
Not yet. There was a question about the word mabul because you say it's a unique word. It's only used in the context of the flood. But I don't think you broke it down for us as to what the origin of the word, like what does it mean?
I haven't. I'm not sure. I mean, people have played with it. It's I'm not sure actually. As a word, it's in terms of maybe
Like its etymology.
Yeah, I haven't seen in the Midrash playing with it actually. I don't know. If anybody
Okay,
can
well,
find, that'd be interesting to see.
yeah, we'll put people on that. We got, a lot of people here at CSP with,
Yes, I mean, it's
advanced
Balal, which is kind of
degrees.
mixed up. Balal and Bavel, which is a Balal, but it's
Mabul.
a Baal is
Right.
like mixing together of things.
I have a kindergartner who's just starting to read. So if I gave him the word mabul, he would break it into two words, ma and bull. And I was at a kosher restaurant on the Upper West Side of New York last week, and we were waiting for our order. So I had him read the items on the menu, and I have a big discovery I wanted to share with you and other people, which is we broke down the word bagel, and I realized when he read it that it's bag L. And I said, oh my God, we have Bavel, Shirel, Bethel. There's so many, and it's God's name is in the word bagel. Therefore, it is truly the Jewish food. It's also holy, as we know, but in the word mabul, maybe we should break it down. But the bagel thing, I think, was a discovery, and I wanted to share it publicly with CSP that God's name is in that food. Okay,
don't forget, by the way, we call Jew from the word Judah, and Yehudah is God's name with a daled. People always kind of forget that. It's funny when you meet a person called Jesus, who's Jesus, who called Jesus, but our name, Jew, means God. That's what it is. It's from Yehudah, which is the Yud and the Hey, the tetragrammaton, with a daled added in. It's literally we are called after God. It's quite powerful when you think about it. In Hebrew, it really stands out when you look at the four letters. But I like the bagel one.
Okay, yeah. It was like one of those discoveries when you hang out with a kindergartner. So
Absolutely.
another discovery, I think we have to end with this, which is we spent a lot of time with the flood, and I don't want to go into it because you did a good job in describing it. It's in your book. I think there's a podcast maybe connected with that story that I can share with people.
I've got a podcast it's called Big Questions of Jewish Belief. I
Right.
interview two students who've got doubts about belief and bringing ideas.
Right, and the question is, was there really a flood? How would it happen? My mother assures me that all the animals from the world were on the the boat together, and I was like, yeah, it'd be a pretty big boat.
Ask your mother,
How do the animals all get
ask your
along
mother two
together?
questions, Ari. Ask,
Yes.
were there woodpeckers and
Yes.
was there woodworm?
Okay. Well,
Ask her
yes,
that.
that's exactly it. So, so that the mythology with a capital M is great, and it's very interesting. And I'm sure I'll share the stuff because that's a discussion another time. Although we spend time with it today, but I would like to end with a discussion that my 8-year-old asked to my wife as we walked on Cape Cod Beach, which was he heard the sun was going to disappear one day, in which case the earth would disappear. In which case, what does that mean about God, belief in God, and Judaism?
Right.
So
Right.
let's end on that positive note because we know that will happen actually, right? The sun will disappear one day. I don't know when though.
Yes. Yes, he's absolutely right. But time stops at that point as well, which is interesting. But it's interesting. And I just read all the chat notes along the way here, which was really fascinating. Yes, Naval, you've made it. Naval or something, the connections you made over there, which are interesting. But just so you know, Peter Gabriel released his last album just a few months ago. And it's going to be the last album that he makes, and we're going to be referring to some of the songs from that. And it is pretty brilliant about life, and as an old man writing about the pastime of life, which we'll probably talk about later on in the course. So,
So your
thanks
last
for all the
question is
comments.
last question,
Okay.
since before you start celebrating independence is from America and your election is since you haven't met these people, have you been to a concert with any of these people and have they sung this song? So you were like, wow, or is this
No, I
also
haven't heard that. No, I've heard Billy Joel. I haven't got to hear Peter Gabriel. I haven't heard Sting actually. These
okay.
ones I haven't heard.
Well, Sting and
Because
Peter, so
I was
yeah,
younger. I was like a teenager, so I listened to the songs on the, and I start, MTV started, so we kind
right.
of it was all
Okay.
about videos for me.
Well,
And back
again, Neil
then,
Eisenberg, I will ask him to call let's see, Bruce Springsteen for you and see if we can arrange a meeting.
yeah,
You can have a discussion with him,
yeah. But he's a brilliant writer, and it's the mixing of the music and the words which are so clever. There's a wonderful movie as well that came out about a guy from the north of England. I think a Hindu guy from the north of England who falls in love with Springsteen, blinded by the light, and relates to Springsteen, even though he's from a totally different culture and a totally different religion. Springsteen speaks to him. It's actually a true story as well. It's a beautiful movie if you want to watch sometime. I saw on a plane once, Blinded by the Light, which is a beautiful version of a appreciation of Springsteen.
Great.
So I'm glad I
Thank
got to
you all.
mention an American classic on the eve of your national holiday.
Right. And Springsteen he's Americana. So everybody, thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Rabbi Zarum, for taking us
My
into
pleasure.
our own music history that most of us don't know, tying it into our texts. And sorry, so next week, what's the promo? What are we doing next week?
Next week we're going to learn Stevie Wonder's beautiful song, which George Michael did a version of it. It's called As. So listen to that song if you want to prepare. And Madonna's actually lovely song. She actually wrote a beautiful, soft song for a child, which is called Dear Jessie, which you might not know, but is absolutely beautiful. And so we're going to look at those songs and their origins in the Torah. Because Stevie Wonder has a direct link to God, clearly, obviously. And so he kind of flies over the words of the Torah along the way. So we'll see how he does that so beautifully next week.
Okay. Everybody, wishing you all a happy July 4th.
Happy July 4th.
If you celebrate. That's what people say. Happy July 4th, everybody. And good luck with your election. Hope it turns out the way you want it, Rabbi Zarum.
Well, whatever Hashem wants, we will do.
Okay. And your voters too. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Be well. Bye.